powered by Intertalk Radio, the groove of the music industry. I'm your host, John Robinson, coming to you live from Vinyl Night Studios in beautiful Thousand Oaks, California. This show features some of the best and most influential people in the music industry. Each week, we will feature an intimate, candid, and in-depth one-on-one with all the musicians, recording engineers, singers, writers, and producers that have changed the world. Before we get started, I'd like to give a big thanks to my sponsors, DW Drums, Paice Cymbals, Remo Drumheads, Regal Drumsticks and Brushes, Blue Microphones, Zoom Cameras, LP Percussion, Roland, Auralex, and Source Connect Pro. You can also download the Intertalk Radio app on your iPhone or Android when you're on the go. Ian Paice, from Nottingham, England, got his first drum kit at age 15. He neither had any formal education in music, but he learned how to play drums by trying to imitate what he had heard from other drummers on the radio. Paice greatly admired drumming styles such as legends Gene Krupa and Buddy Rich, and always dreamt of emulating them. He practiced hard on the drums, especially noting that being left-handed, he needed to come up with techniques which would fit the right-handed drum kits. Though Paice was playing in his father's dance band in the early 60s, the first professional band he played with was Georgie and the Rave, a local group, which later came to be known as the Shindigs. After a short stint with the group, Paice left it and joined another group called MI5, which later became the Maze. Soon after Paice left, he formed Deep Purple with Rod Evans, Jon Lord, Nick Simper, and Ritchie Blackmore in '68. Deep Purple would later be one of the biggest rock bands in the world, especially during the 60s and 70s. They would soon start dominating the charts with such albums as Deep Purple and Rock, Fireball, Machine Head, and Who Do We Think We Are, Come Taste the Band, Stormbringer and Burn. Paice's drumming techniques have been showcased in many of their hit songs, but the best examples are Made in Japan, The Mule, Child in Time, Flight of the Rat, and, of course, Machine Head. Paice was called for studio recording by a number of great artists who include Peter York, Elf, Green Bullfrog, Velvet Underground, Babyface, Eddie Harris, George Harrison, Paul McCartney, William Shatner, and Jim Capaldi, just to name a few. From 79 to 82, Paice worked with Whitesnake and released 3 albums. In 1982, he also joined and played with the Gary Moore Band. After 2 years of playing with Moore, he got back into Deep Purple. In 1999, he made a guest appearance with Paul McCartney's Run Devil Run. Paice released a solo DVD and continues his world clinic domination. Paice is also in the Drummers Hall of Fame and was just recently inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame class of 2016. Deep Purple continues to tour worldwide and remains atop of rock and roll's elite bands. Ladies and gentlemen, Hall of Fame legend Ian Paice. Welcome to Vinyl Night, Ian.
Hi, Johnny. How are you, man?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm just made up with that wonderful intro.
Hey, man, you did it.
Yeah. Sometimes I look back and it seems like a real long time, and other times it just seems like everything was yesterday.
Well, I mean, you've got a beautiful career, and we just touched base a couple of weeks ago. And I heard you playing, and you are at the absolute pinnacle of the drumming game, and it was such an honor to see you play.
Oh, it's really kind. Thank you, mate. I don't know about you, but there are times when I really doubt what I do. When I'm surrounded by other really good players who do things that I can't do and things that I have no interest in doing, but I know how difficult what they do is. You think, is my stuff really that good? It's that. I think if you have an element of self-doubt, it probably keeps you on the straight and narrow and keeps you aware that you can't just sit back and let it happen. You've got to keep trying to make it work.
Well, I mean, you've definitely set your own bar, and like I've told hundreds of people that when Hush came out. It changed my life. It honest to God did, because I was, there was stuff out there, but then when I heard you guys as a unit playing and the way it came across on the radio, I'm not the only one that feels that way.
I know, yeah. I've heard it from lots of players that when they heard that, it was sort of, it kick-started a lot of people's sort of interest. Looking back at it, all I can really remember of it, it was 3 or 4 takes, and it was something we'd rehearsed for a couple of months. And, you know, if you can't get it right with a samba, you know, which is a pretty, you know, cool rhythm, then you really never will get it right at all. You know, and it just sort of was, I suppose because we really had no fear of what we were doing, we just sort of sat down for 10 minutes and grooved. And I think that's what comes through on that track. Yeah, you can look back and say, okay, the production values aren't the same as we have now, but that doesn't matter. What happens is the whole thing moves along in its own little space in time. And I think that's what always hooks up with any record. You know, it's got to talk to the listener. If you do that, then they remember it and they want to play it again.
Well, I've out 3 albums, so there's no more top end on any of my vinyl, thanks to you. So way to go.
Oh, you helped buy my house. I like it. Great.
Well, listen, like I do with all my guests, I kind of go back to the beginning, and you know, I know that your father was extremely musical. Why don't you fill everybody in on that?
My man was a piano player, and a very good one, and all his stuff that he was doing was pre-Second World War. Played with a fairly successful dance band here in the UK. Then, of course, the war came along and tore all that up. And then when that was all over, of course, you know, he was in a situation where he now had a family, and work was not easy to get. So basically, he went from being a professional musician to an amateur, you know, just to find a real job to keep going. But his music, which was all 30s, 40s swing and piano trios, Art Tatum and those sort of guys, you know. Right. It was always on the record player. And so when I was just a little kid, you know, playing with my toys on the floor, all this music was going on all the time. And when I was about 12 years old, I was watching. We didn't have much TV in the UK when I was a kid. We had 2 or 3 stations. But Sunday afternoon, there was always an old Hollywood movie, and it was usually a musical type thing. And lots of these films had the old musical great thing, and it might be the Tommy Dorsey Orchestra, it might be Krupa with Benny Goodman, you know, and these were sort of live cuts in the Hollywood studios. And they just grabbed my attention. And whatever I saw, I kept focusing in on what the drummer was doing, just because it was more exciting and more interesting as a kid to look at. And I thought, that looks really good. So I picked up a pair of Mum's old big wooden knit needles, and I sat on the sofa with the arm between my knees, and I just started whacking along on the sofa, trying to emulate what I saw these guys doing. And that's how it sort of started for me. And this went on for like 2 or 3 years until, as you said in the bio, I got my first kit at 15. But when I started to play real drums, when I had the feel, it was always coming out with a swing. You know, it was always coming out with those influences that were going into my head as a kid without me knowing it. So when I tried to play rock and roll, it still came out with that. Even if I didn't play the dotted feel, I was thinking it. So it had an inherent swing to it. You know what I mean? I mean, if I ever got offered the job, say with AC/DC, I couldn't do it. It is just 2 straight 8s. I wouldn't do the job well. Everything to me has a lilt to it. You know, I mean, Smoke on the Water, the track, on the face of it, it's a straight 8, medium tempo rock and roll tune. But I'm thinking in a bounce there. I'm thinking in da 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 da. I'm not thinking da 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 da. You know, I cannot get out of that. But I'm thankful for that because, you know, really in rock and roll, nobody else does that. Nobody thinks that way. They don't think in terms of a straight 8 having a swing beat to it. You know, I don't think they do anyway.
No, that's very interesting. I think a lot of us share, you know, your very early beliefs because you know, swing is definitely the key to music, and because the way we can interpret that.
But you can have 2 guys on identical kits, right, played exactly the same piece. One guy will have your foot moving, your head twitching around. The other guy will leave you stone cold, and you won't know why. Yeah. Because on the face of it, they're playing exactly the same thing. But one has got it, and one will never find it. It's as simple as that. It's not like a bit of technique that you can teach. You either understand the way it has to be, or you just don't understand.
Well, now, how did your parents put you on violin first, and did you dislike that?
Well, when I was about 9, 10, I thought again, all this music was going on. I thought I'd like to try and play something. Well, we lived in a very small house surrounded by other small houses, so something as loud as a drum kit was definitely a non-starter. So my dad got something cheap and small and quiet.
Yeah.
And
yes.
I had a whack at this for 3 months. And, it's awful. It wasn't me. I had no interest in it. And I tell people, I put it on my knee, I turned it over, and I just patted the back of it, and it sounded much better. It sounded much more fun to play. And so, it was just a little trifling, to try and see if but no, it wasn't for me. No, never. I mean, I would never have been a Yehudi Menuhin. Let's put it that way. It wouldn't work. No.
Well, getting back to the very first kit, so when you got it, I mean, was it like a special occasion? Were you surprised? And do you remember what the drums were?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it wasn't a special surprise. My old man had told me, you're obviously not going to stop, so we'll get some drums. Money wasn't plentiful, so it was probably the cheapest thing that's ever been put on the market by anybody. It consisted of 3 drums, a 20-inch bass drum, a 10-inch single-head tom, and a 5-inch snare drum, all of which had over the hoop clamps to hold for the tension rods, but they were made out of mild steel. So if you tried to tension the drum, they just used to break. They used to ping and fly off. So there was no way to actually tune the damn things. They were a company called Gigster. It was a glorious red glitter, and I think it cost the princely sum of about $50, the whole thing. And it came with a 10-inch cymbal, which sounded like a dustbin lid. Trash can lid, sorry. I mean, it was awful, but it was a start. It even came with real vellum heads. I mean, it was, real calf heads. And, for the first couple of months, it was okay. I mean, so when I started working with my dad, it was like Saturday night dinner and dances. We were playing waltzes and quick steps and foxtrots. So this was enough. But, as much as I enjoyed picking up my $10 a night from my dad, which was great fun because I only had $10 a week in the job.
Right.
It wasn't really fun, and so like all kids, you find other kids who want to form a band, and it just went the way of everybody else. You get 3 or 4 guys together, and you do the best you can, and you find yourself ending playing in a pub, and it sort of takes on from there.
Right. And you had many bands before you basically found the right band.
Well, it sounds like many, but it really wasn't. It was actually a wonderful confidence trick. See, what we would do, we would have a band with one name. Then we played all the gigs. So, you couldn't go back to the promoter and say, can we do these again? Because they wanted new bands. So when you'd done the circuit, you just changed the name and then did the circuit again. So it was the same band with a different name.
That is highly clever. That's so...
you got to keep working, and we did it with 2 bands. We did the circuit, had enough, changed the name, put in 2 or 3 new songs, did the circuit, changed the name again, maybe changed the band. But really, it was only 2 bands before I got into the Purple seat. It was only 2 bands. I look back at that, and that's pretty amazing. I got the first kid on my 15th birthday, and in 19, I'm in Deep Purple.
Right.
4 years.
See?
In the space, you look at it, it's no time at all.
You got to give it to the Red Sparkle,
Yeah. From Red Sparkle, I went to an blue aquamarine Premier kit, which was a bit better. Ooh. And I had that for a few months, but the one I wanted, I convinced my dad that he had to lend me some money to get it. I got the Ringo Ludwig kit. I got the Black Oyster.
Oh, you did?
Oh, I did, yeah. And that's what I worked with right up to the beginning of Purple. I love that drum kit. It was great.
And you don't still have that, do you?
No, like all kids, I destroyed it. I got bored with it, tried to improve it, and completely knackered it. So no, it became firewood in the end, which is a shame.
It probably burned quickly. So.
It did, and viciously.
Oh man! Why we're coming into the end of our first segment, but
sure. There's
a story preceding you joining Deep Purple that it's about Roundabout and a drummer named Bobby Woodman.
Yeah, sure. That's do you want to do that in this section, or do you want to do the next section?
Yeah. Let's come out of this section and let's set that up because when I read about this, I couldn't believe it, and even though I think it's so just clever about how this came about.
Well, needs must.
So anyway, so we will be right back with legend, Hall of Famer Ian Paice, and he's going to set us up with a story about the beginning of Deep Purple. We'll be right back.
Are you serious about your music? Are you ready to run with the big dogs? The experts at Pitbull Audio have the gear to get you into the game. From leading manufacturers like Mesa Boogie, Fender, Pioneer, and American Audio. To sound your best, you need the best. Pitbull Audio can deliver in rehearsal, on stage, and into the big time. Dropping beats, shredding guitar, or making the crowd roar. Whatever you dream, Pitbull Audio can help make it happen. We are Pitbull Audio. We want you to play it loud. PitbullAudio.com.
You know what's all around you every waking moment of your life? Marketing. You're choking on it. I'm Scott Robertson, and when it comes to strategic PR, branding, and marketing, I've seen it all. And actually, I'm still seeing it because bad marketing never sleeps. Join me each week on May the Best Brand Win, right here on Intertalk Radio, and learn how to make the marketing for your brand unforgettable.
Hi, I'm Tim Dolbear, the host of Sound Experience on Intertalk Radio. Each week, I talk with top professional audio engineers, producers, musicians, and the manufacturers that make the tools that we use in the studio each and every day. From capturing the perfect take to mastering your final release, and the tools and how the pros use them, we are going to dive deep into their process and learn from their experience. I look forward to you joining us each week on Sound Experience with me, your host, Tim Dolbear.
Hey, it's Tracy Smith
and Beth Venus
of Girls Talk Rock right here on the Intertalk Radio Network.
Every Wednesday at 5 p.m. Pacific.
Okay, Beth, they know that, but we want you to know that the industry pro's choice is Silver Tiger Production.
SDP is a full-service production agency offering sound, lighting, installations, talent buying, staffing, backline equipment rental, and sales. Kapow!
It's everything in the entertainment performance industry. It's all that. SilverTigerProduction.com.
See the queen.
We are back with Hall of Fame legend Ian Paice, and we were talking at the end of the first segment about you were, I guess, in a place, and this drummer, Bobby Woodman, was playing drums, and something happened. Maybe you can tell everybody about this.
Yeah, well, the band I was in with Rod Evans, well, obviously we weren't going anywhere. It got as far as it could go. And Rod had answered an advert in the Melody Maker magazine for this new band that was being formed. When he got there, he saw that it was Ritchie Blackmore, Jon Lord, and Nick Simper, who he didn't know, and this guy, Bobby Woodman. Now, Ritchie had seen us playing a year before in the Star Club in Hamburg, and he obviously liked the way I played. He came up and introduced himself and said, I really like what you're doing. We went back to England. Ritchie was living in Hamburg, and we thought no more about that. But, of course, when Rod applied for the job, Ritchie recognized him and he said, you still got the drummer? So Rod said, yeah. We said, you've got to bring him along. We've got to get him along. And I thought, well, you've got Bobby Woodman. Instead, said, don't worry about that. Just get him here. So the next day, I got a train up there. I was met by Ritchie. And they were living in this big farmhouse. They'd rented this whole farmhouse there so they could make a row, whatever time of day it was. Anyway, don't know how they did it, but they got Bobby to agree to either drive down or cycle down to the village like 2 miles away to get a couple of pack of cigarettes for those guys who smoked. And he did. Now, as he walked out the front door, I was brought in the back door, and I sat down on his kit, and I played, and I stole his gig. It's as simple as that, There was no nice way to do it, And it's not that Bobby wasn't a good player. He was a good player. But obviously it just wasn't firing on all cylinders for them. And so that's all it was, that if you get a chance, you'll know this yourself, John. You take a chance, you better take it. Because there might not be another one ever come again. So,
right.
was it a nice thing to do? Probably not. Was it the right thing to do? Definitely.
Absolutely, and I preach that 100%. My big question to you though was he was playing right-handed, and you came in there and still kicked ass.
Well, luckily he had a double kick kit, so I could bluff it through. At least I had a bass drum on the correct foot. I just had to uncross my hand, so it wasn't too bad. It wasn't like
such a great story.
I wasn't, that much of a genius that I could do that. But, I could bluff away. And, again, it's a matter of getting the feel right. If the other guys start smiling when you're playing, then you know you're doing something right. And when you're in an audition situation, that's about as much as you can hope for. If they're enjoying what you're doing, you're in with a chance for the job.
Yeah, you nailed it.
You asked me another question early on about the Roundabout group. Well, Deep Purple was actually put together by a guy called Chris Curtis, who was the drummer with the Searchers. Now, Chris, Chris rapidly lost touch with reality in the nicest way. But he was going to be the drummer, the singer, the bass player, the guitarist, and the keyboard player at different times. And his idea that there would be a nucleus of musicians, and then other guys would come in and out the band as they felt like. You call it a traffic circle. We call it a roundabout. So people would come in, do a little bit, and get off. And that was the idea of the Roundabout name for a band. Well, everybody realized by this time that Chris had gone completely mad, and he was sort of promoted sideways out the door. And Ritchie and Jon then took over, getting it into the semblance of what would become Deep Purple. So again, it was never a different band. It was the same sort of nucleus, but it was a wonderfully crazy idea which would never have worked. And so the guy who put Ritchie and Jon together, Chris, I mean, he just wasn't part of it anymore. So that's what happened there.
Mm. Wow, and then hence the birth of my favorite rock band of all time. So, I mean, what was it like in that 1968 time period? It must have been almost surreal and yet really hectic.
It was surreal. I mean, it didn't start out well. Our first shows were going to be in Denmark. We were just going to take the whole thing over there and see how it worked. you know. But in those days, there was no sort of EEC, you know, economic union. Each different country in Europe, you know, you had to have carnets and visas and things to work in their country. So on our first trip to Denmark, we didn't have the right visas. So Jon Lord and I were carted off from the immigration people to a police station in the back of a dog car. That didn't start out too well. You know, where they put the canines, you know, behind the mesh grill. And we were put in the police station in a cell for a couple of hours while we worked out our visa situation, which got cleared up. So that didn't all go for great things. But the gigs were great. Just little clubs, but people really enjoyed what was going on. And it really did kickstart then when we got into the studio and cut the first album, Shades of Deep Purple, which was just two 4-hour sessions. We cut 4 tracks.
Wow.
First day, 4 tracks the second day. They mixed it, it was out, and all of a sudden Hush was just a mega hit, you know. And at that point, you had a feeling that life was changing. You know, nobody knew what for, because, you know, success was something we'd been looking at from the outside, you know. You could see it and like it, but you had no real taste of it. And it really started in the States before it started anywhere else, because of the effect of Hush on the American market. It was a minor hit in Europe. It picked up much later on, but the States hit onto it first. And, you know, I knew my life had changed. The first night in LA, we'd flown all the way over from London and jet lagged, but we weren't allowed to rest and relax. The first night, so here, you know, I leave my little, you know, our little flat in London, and the next night I'm in Hollywood, and invited to a party. Well, you know, that's lovely. Right. The party was at Hugh Hefner's penthouse at the top of this building on Sunset and Alta Loma, and of course all the attributes of Hugh Hefner's lifestyle were wandering around, looking incredibly beautiful. And there was Jackie D. Shannon, and there was Jim Brown, the football player. There's all sorts of people I just heard the names of or seen pictures, and all of a sudden, you know, after an 11-hour flight, I'm in a different world. And I sort of had an inkling that my life had changed a bit in that 24 hours, you know. Yeah, and that was mind-boggling, it was. And to wake up in the morning and be able to turn the TV on and find there was something other than just a, you know, random noise, because we didn't have TV in the daytime in England. This was me. I remember the 9 o'clock movie in the morning going, oh, God, this is great. I mean, it's just wonderful. So it's a total culture shock, which I loved.
What was that first venue in L.A.?
The first time we did it was we were supporting Cream, and we did it at the Forum.
You were at the Forum, okay.
There's footage of that around. I've got something at home. Somebody sent me some real scrappy black and white footage and terrible sound, but it's there. It exists. We were meant to do the whole tour with Cream, but somehow it got down to the 2 LA gigs, the San Diego gig, and then we were off. I don't know why. I don't know whether it was political or whether it was musical, whatever. But they were the first gigs we did in the States. But the whole tour was very good. It was a long tour. We did 3 months there. The Cream thing was meant to be about 3 weeks, and we were going to pick it up. So we picked up some gigs on the dead 2 weeks. We should have been touring with them, but we had a great time. Wasted a lot of money.
Well, I mean, that's what it's for, you know, and I'm going to reflect probably that why Queen separated was they didn't have a #1 record.
Yeah. I love watching them play, though. I love watching them play, and it was just...
Oh, I loved Queen, too.
Special. It was special. Not just because of the Eric thing, which was one of, but the interplay between Jack and Ginger at that time was just effortless, subconscious. It just worked. It was lovely, you know. Well,
I mean, I would pay to see that, obviously, anytime. Two of my most influential bands. So you guys, you did that 3 months, and then you went back home and just, or did you kick back into the UK at that point?
We went back into Europe and knocked out another record, did some European stuff, then came back to the States again. We knocked out 3 albums in the space of about 15 months.
Jeez.
It was getting a little over the top, the pressure of doing all these gigs and being in the studio and trying to keep the quality up. But it had become very plain to us that as nice a singer as Rod was, his voice wasn't able to go where we were actually going, not by intent, just by evolution, just the way that Ritchie,
right,
Jon, and myself were starting to play. Rod's voice couldn't go there. And with Nick was a really good bass player, but he didn't want to go there. He preferred something different. So while there was this feeling of it not being complete anymore, it was decided that, if we want to keep it going, the 3 of us, we have to bring in new blood. And that's why the change came at the end of '69. Rod couldn't go where we wanted him to go, and Nick didn't want to. And that was, like all these things, you look back and it's, when you wake up in the morning, you have a band, and in the evening you don't have a band. That's pretty devastating. It's an awful situation you find yourself in. Even if it's one you've created yourself. When the reality smacks you in the face, the world has suddenly gone quite cold. But I think we all realized that it had to, Jon and I and Ritchie had something really good going. So we had to keep it, give it another chance with some new blood. And that's what we did.
Well, that heyday of the Deep Purple Mark II, 69 through 73, I mean, that was the heyday. It was... Yeah. It set the world on fire. I mean, literally.
Well, it was a magic time. It was a magic time for bands from my little country, too. We'd taken all these great rock and roll ideas and tunes from the U.S., and we'd found a different way, or practically the only way we could do it, and then we brought it back to you, and you sort of liked it, which was great for us. But there were so many good bands coming out then. You had Jethro Tull, you had Led Zeppelin, you had 10 Years After, you could go on and on and on forever, the bands that came out of that period, from Britain. So it wasn't just us. There was a wonderful freedom of expression, and all the bands were different. It's very, very hard to say that nowadays. It was very, very easy to tell the difference between Jethro Tull and Led Zeppelin. And Cream. You could just tell just by listening to the way it was constructed, the way the guys played, and the voices were different. And that was a glorious time. So if you had the juice, and you could cut through, and people would take notice and remember. And it was a time where music was far more important to that generation of kids than it is now. Now it's something you do as opposed to something else you do. Then it was the only thing you did. It was the only thing that excited you. It was the only freedom you had in the week. When you finished your work, it was, which band are we going to see this weekend? There was nothing else.
Right.
So it was far more important. And more of us, I think, were trying to do it seriously. I mean, even if we didn't know it was serious at the time, but it was our life's love. And that's why I think we got so many great bands come out of Britain at that period of time. We just happened to be one of them.
Well, I mean, you guys invaded us twice. Nice job.
Yeah, it didn't do too well the first time, did it?
Oh, man. But listen, me and my boys from Creston, Iowa, we'd order the records and run as quick as we could when it came in, and it was either you guys, you're right, or Jethro Tull, and we'd look at the credits and look and see the pictures of you, and it was just it wasn't like we were idolizing. It was part of the culture of who we were.
And you link with vinyl, records were big enough that you could actually read the words, you could actually see the photographs. It made sense, and you had something physical that you had a connection with. You don't have the same thing with that tiny little CD box if you still buy a CD, and you definitely don't have it with an MP3 download. It's just not the same. There's a little bit of magic gone out of it. I understand it has to go forward. It's like, I love black and white movies, but I understand it had to become color. It has to go forward, but you sort of miss something. Something gets lost.
Yeah. Yeah, it's romantic. It's romanticism.
Yeah, and I don't know. It's like sometimes you see television, it's too real. And you see some of those old movies, it's unreal. It's not meant to be real. It's meant to be escapism. It's meant to be artificial. And sometimes it just gets a bit ordinary. You sort of lose interest. I wanted my stars to be mystical and unattainable and, godlike. I sort of miss all that stuff, and I think with vinyl it was just so great because you had this thing and you had a physical contact. You had to do something to make the music work, and because they were fragile, you looked after them. It was a whole different vibe, Great fun though.
Yeah, are you guys re-releasing on the 180 grams the new vinyls?
We leave that with the record company, but every time they want to do something with vinyl, we just say, please go ahead, because a lot of people really do want to hear it, and especially older fans who, as you say, they worn the record through from both sides, so it just sort of disintegrates.
Yeah.
They want the chance to feel that again, And it's the weirdest thing because I could understand if the record was recorded analog and mastered analog and then cut onto a vinyl disc. The whole recording from A to B was made for that way of doing it. I find it a little confusing when you've recorded digitally and then you cut an analog record of it. I'm sure there is a difference, but I don't know if it's quite as valid as the complete analog process. I don't know. Do you lose the warp somewhere or don't you? I don't know.
A bit. Listen, Ian, hold that thought. We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Tim Dolbear, host of Sound Experience here on Intertalk Radio. And Source Connect by Source Element is the essential tool that we use to link between my studio in Austin, Texas, and the WS radio station in San Diego. Now, with Source Connect, not only can we communicate in real time and with HD audio, but it's synced up and is of a high enough quality that I can use it for real-time ADR work, remote recording, and overdubbing, and it even allows me to remotely control a DAW. Source Connect by Source Element. Affordable, high-quality audio and video connection over the internet for all of your production needs.
This is Jackie Bertoni from Jackie's Groove. Come join me weekly on my journey through the music business as I take you behind the velvet rope, interviewing industry notables such as Al Di Meola, Michael McDonald, and Al Jarreau, to name but a few. Listen to their stories on being in the studios recording #1 hits and onto the stages throughout the globe. Allow me to be your music historian. You can hear me live every Monday at 2 p.m. and every Wednesday at 12 noon Pacific Standard Time or 24/7 on jackiesgroove.com. Ready to get your groove on?
Girls are talking rock again.
And people are listening.
Today we're talking bands.
Let's talk promotion. Red Giant promo, graphics, EPKs, video, photos, social media, and brand building using content marketing.
But let's talk studio at CCMA, which is events, rehearsal, tour prep, piano, guitar, voice, rock band, lessons, workshops, and clinics. Yeah!
Both proud sponsors of Girls Talk Rock.
Well, get the lowdown on these services and contact me, Tracy, at girlstalkrock.com.
Are you serious about your music? Are you ready to run with the big dogs? The experts at Pitbull Audio have the gear to get you into the game. From leading manufacturers like Mesa Boogie, Fender, Pioneer, and American Audio. To sound your best, you need the best. Pitbull Audio can deliver in rehearsal, on stage, and into the big time. Dropping beats, shredding guitar, or making the crowd roar. Whatever you dream, Pitbull Audio can help make it happen. We are Pitbull Audio. We want you to play it loud. PitbullAudio.com.
We are back with Hall of Fame legend Ian Paice, and we were just listening to Eddie Harris from 1974. You obviously did things outside of Deep Purple, and why don't you tell us a little bit about those sessions?
Well, it was one afternoon. I think Eddie's manager decided that if he was going to sell them records, he needed some really big rock and roll names in the studio to help this be achieved. And I remember being offered a ridiculous amount of money for the session. I didn't know who the hell Eddie Harris was at the time. I had no knowledge of him at all. Anyway, they wanted me to cut 3 tracks. And they came up with all this sheet music, drum parts. I don't read drum music. If you play me the arrangement, pretty much like the great Buddy did, he'd listen to it a couple of times, he'd get it down, he'd do it. Reading was not one of his fortes, so he'd say, look, I can remember stuff. So they did anyway. He played it a couple of times, but he said, you don't need to know anything about this when he showed me this piece of music. And basically, it just had 3 notes twice in a bar. And basically, the 3 notes were hi-hat, rim shot, bass drum. Tit-ta-um, tit-ta-um, tit-ta-um. He said, just do that for about, 3 or 4 minutes. So I said, fine, I can do that. So we did that track, which any session drummer would have done far better than me and cost him a lot less money. But it was about having the names on the record. That's what it was. I think it was right. Stevie Winwood and just lots and lots of guys who they just tagged together for an afternoon in the studio. I remember it with great affection, but, it was something so left field for me to do. It was, again, a learning curve. But, you do these things in your career. I remember back in New York in, must be 68, 69, doing a session there in the afternoon for a band that needed some tracks cut. I did them, thought no more about it. Turned out that was Velvet Underground. But wow. It was only when somebody played it to me, even like 5 years ago, that I sort of recognized me, but it's so long ago. Apart from that, I couldn't swear 100% it was me, but it sounded like me, And somebody said, yeah, it's definitely you. So you do these things, and they sort of disappear in the mists of time. And somebody resurrects it, and you go, oh, yeah, I did do that, didn't I? I remember the thing I did with Jim Capaldi one time. He was he was recording in Germany, and he found this little pop single by a Brazilian band, and he wanted to use the actual bases of the record and record over the top of it. Unfortunately, the tempo on the record was all over the place. It sped up one bar, slowed down another bar, went 3 bars, went faster. I said, well, how are we going to do that? He said, just do the best you can. Oh, okay, did the track. And I got it perfectly right with the track. Didn't stop it being a piece of rubbish because the tempo was all over the place. So it sounds like I'm the one screwing the tempo up. I said, Jimmy, if you're happy, just do what you want with it. I can't take any money for this because it's, you've lost me. So you do these things. People ask you sometimes as a favor as a friend. Sometimes it's, it's a financial transaction, and you just do it.
Well, not to have tongue in cheek, but with the William Shatner thing I found it just, I smiled after you did that.
How could you refuse that? How could you not do a record with Captain Kirk? Come on.
There you go.
It's genius, Plus, he had some really good guys playing on it. Johnny Winter.
It was so funky. It was so fun.
Yeah. I did. They sent the tape, the tracks over via internet. I went to my little studio. My son engineered it. We knocked it out in about 45 minutes. Sent it back. They were happy. Everybody smiling. It's great.
Yeah. I'm still smiling from it.
More than the record, I got great TV plugs from Bill doing all these late night shows. Now we had Ian Paice on drums. I'm sure before that he hadn't got a clue who Ian Paice was, but I was getting all these big recognition things on late night TV in the States. It was wonderful. It was worth more than $500-600 I charged them for the track.
Well, let's back up. Everybody knows the Smoke in the Water story and the Montreux and everything. And, you were talking to me a couple of weeks ago about, how once, you guys moved over to the Montreux Grand Hotel, everybody in the band were converting the hallways and stairwells for Machine Head. My question to you is, what setup were you using, and where were you put? How did you deal with that?
Well, like lots of hotels, there was a main long corridor, with the bedrooms off left and right. And there was this little T-junction where there was a little tiny room, 2 rooms off to one side. So there was a tiny corridor off the side. So we blocked off one end of the big corridor with bed mattresses we'd taken out of the bedrooms. We blanked off the other side because you're in an echo chamber basically. So you're trying to control the reverberations in there by killing it a bit. And then we put the drums in the little arm of the T, and it was just if I remember right, it was either my Black Oyster Ludwig or it was a Silver Sparkle one. It might have been a Silver Sparkle one, which was my first American kit. So that'd have been a 68 Ludwig. Same thing, 22, 13, 16, regular kit. And we actually had a really nice ambient sound in the setup. It was really very nice to play with. But when we finished the album, we were having so much fun mixing it, we forgot we had these 2 ambient tracks. That's why when you listen to the record, it's so tight and close and in your face. You really are 2 inches away from the snare drum. That's the way it sounds.
Right.
But when we went back to do the remaster 25 or 30 years later, wherever it was, we found, what are these 2 tracks here? We brought up all this room sound, which is what we meant it to be in the first place, and we just totally forgot they were there. Quite amazing.
Well, maybe that was a good mistake in a sense, because it is in your face, and people feel that,
Yeah, and of course, because it's that close, you hear all the little nuances, you hear all the little drum lines, you hear the little drags, the little push notes, you hear everything. Now, admittedly, if you make a mistake, that's in your face too. But luckily, there weren't too many on that, and it sort of sits very nicely. But also, when we did the remix, you had a choice of the original, or you could have one with the ambience tracks, and they both sounded good, just totally different.
Right. Were you tracking as a 2 or 3 piece at that point, and then overdubbing the essentials, or was everybody playing?
We still do it the same way today. The backing tracks are all 4 instruments going on at the same time.
Okay.
In those days, if you did make a big howler, then you had to stop and start again. You know yourself now. If somebody makes a howler today, you complete the track and you see what you've got, because it can be fixed. But we try and get some interplay on the backing track, which you only achieve when you're actually doing it together. It may only happen for a couple of bars in a piece of music where, I put an axe on the bass drum and Roger hits it with me and Don goes against it. Something that you wouldn't plan because it makes no sense, but when you hear it back at that moment in time, it's perfect. And if you don't play together, you're not going to find those little things. So we try and do that because it's really important. You might not do it. You might do a whole album where you don't find them, but when you do find them, it just holds the whole thing together and saying, okay, this is a band that played it together. And I think that's really nice.
Well, yeah, I agree. And again, I don't even see a lot of that in today's time. So, but, I wanted to give you props for being a Paice artist for 45 years. I think you may be the first Paice artist. I'll be honest.
There weren't a lot.
Congratulations.
There weren't a lot of them. Well, back in the day, you had 2 choices. You had a Vida Siljan, or you had this new company, Paice. Now, I had a Vida Siljans at the time. Only a couple of them because they were very expensive. But over here in Europe, there was nobody carried a lot of stock because they were so expensive. And they were quite brittle cymbals, and they weren't designed for rock and roll playing. They just weren't designed that way. And so eventually they cracked. And trying to find another cymbal, another Vidas, that sounded like the one I had, just turning out to be impossible. you know?
Right.
So I thought, well, there's got to be something else, you know, there's got to be another way around this. And I can't remember who it was, but it was somebody said, look, there's a great company in Switzerland making really good cymbals. And it came from that. You know, I got in touch, and they invited me over to Knoxville to the factory to have a little look round. And it was just brilliant. And they said, this is our 22-inch ride. I said, that's lovely. Here's another one. Sounded exactly the same. Here's another one. Sounded exactly the same.
Right.
Now, as a working drummer, you know yourself, you know, you don't go out of your way to hurt your instrument. But damage does happen. Sometimes things get lost. Sometimes they get stolen. Sometimes they get driven over by a truck. And you need to know you can replace it. And if you can replace it with something that sounds exactly the same, then there is no interruption in the way you play. You know, if you're looking for something new, that's different. But if you're looking for what you had yesterday and you need it today, then Paice's way of making cymbals was just a revelation, because you could just rely on the fact that if you did have a mishap somewhere, you could go into any store and you could pick up exactly the same instrument, which was great. And that's why would, you know, all the people who've been kind enough to help me with equipment, you know, so long as the equipment is great, I will always stay loyal to that company, because I see no point. You know, I've obviously gone there because I like what they make. So long as they keep doing the right job and the instrument stays the same quality, I'm not going anywhere. You know. Plus, you make friends. You make friends with people. It sort of goes beyond a business thing. You actually, you know, people you meet 2 or 3 times a year, it's great to see them. You sit down, have a meal, have a drink, tell some rude stories, whatever. You know, it's a much more personal thing.
Well, well stated, and that's coming from a Hall of Fame legend. While this segment winds down, you guys have a new record coming out?
Yeah, we cut it in Nashville in February, and it looks like it'll be coming out next February. We did the record with the amazing Bob Edrin producing. He did the last one for us back in 2012. We had so much fun with him, and working in Nashville, used exactly the same studio. We cut it the same way and had exactly the same great time. And I say that because, quite honestly, I've not enjoyed being in studios for a long time. I've always found them sort of limiting in the fact that I'm playing for a machine, which is heartless, as opposed to playing for people who I can connect with. You know, so I've always found it not difficult, but just not something that I would do as a first choice. I know we have to make records. It's great. But when we found this place in Nashville called the Tracking Room. Marvelous, big, old-style studio. You know, you do a lot of studio work. You know, some studio, you go, you hit the drum and it goes, duh. And you know it's going to be bloody awful to play. Even if it sounds good in the control unit, it's going to be no fun to play. You go into another room, the drum goes bang, and you go, oh, I'm going to enjoy this. And the Tracking Room's like that. You hit the drum, it goes bang. And then playing is fun. And when playing is fun, playing is easy. When it's not fun, it's a little more difficult.
Those are words of wisdom from Hall of Fame legend Ian Paice. Ian, I'd like to thank you so much for being my guest. You've been listening to Vinyl Night, powered by Intertalk Radio, the groove of the music industry. You can contact me at jr@vinylnight.com. Make it your Vinyl Night. Thank you, Ian Paice.
My pleasure, man. Love you talking to you.
Make this Love you too, buddy. Talk to you soon. I'm John J.R. Robinson, and every week, music creation comes alive through stories, experiences, and sounds when vinyl records filled our hearts and minds. My friends and I share our tips and techniques used in creation of iconic tracks for recording artists such as Michael Jackson, Eric Clapton, Quincy Jones, and Steve Winwood, to name a few. Vinyl has emerged hot, and the soul of vinyl defines art and passion which burns deepest at night. Tune in. Hi, this is Tim Dolbear from Eclectica Studios. I'm a full-time mixing and recording engineer. I work with Grammy winners, labels, and indie artists, using state-of-the-art digital mixing and restoration tools and the very best in analog gear. Really, though, it's my ability to bring tracks to life and fulfill your vision for your music. This has made me sought after by producers and artists worldwide. So spend your time working on music and not chasing a mix down a rabbit hole. Go to timdolbear.com and check out our free one-song mix offer.
You know what's all around you every waking moment of your life? marketing. You're choking on it. I'm Scott Robertson, and when it comes to strategic PR, branding, and marketing, I've seen it all. And actually, I'm still seeing it because bad marketing never sleeps. Join me each week on May the Best Brand Win, right here on Intertalk Radio, and learn how to make the marketing for your brand unforgettable.
Are you serious about your music? Are you ready to run with the big dogs? The experts at Pitbull Audio have the gear to get you into the game. From leading manufacturers like Mesa Boogie, Fender, Pioneer, and American Audio. To sound your best, you need the best. Pitbull Audio can deliver in rehearsal, on stage, and into the big time. Dropping beats, shredding guitar, or making the crowd roar. Whatever you dream, Pitbull Audio can help make it happen. We are Pitbull Audio. We want you to play it loud. PitbullAudio.com.